Assalamu alaikum. This screencast is brought to you by Prophetic Principles, Personal Development the Prophetic Way. For more information and materials, please visit our website at www.propheticprinciples.com. My name is Abu Dawood, and in this three-part screencast, I'll be talking to you about how to motivate our children to read the Quran. Now, before getting into the how of motivating our children to read the Quran, it might be worth answering the question of why one should motivate their children to read the Quran in the first place, as opposed to motivating individuals to read the Quran later in their adult life. Traditionally, it has been a common practice among Muslim parents to enroll or teach their Quran to their children as soon as possible. And there are a few reasons for this, and I'll mention a few, and I'm sure you can come up with some more on your own. But one key reason that parents want their children to read the Quran in as early an age as possible is because parents want their children to develop a connection with the Quran as soon as possible, so that this connection remains with the child for the duration of their life and acts as a guide and a support and a source of barakah for that child throughout their life. Also, parents want their child to develop a foundation in their religion, and learning to read the Quran is one key element of that foundation. And the hope is that through learning to read the Quran, the child will want to further pursue studies in the religion as they grow. Second of all, children have sharper memory and capacity to learn compared to adults. So it's actually easier to learn to read the Quran at an earlier age from a mental performance perspective. Later on in life, our minds become sullied and dulled, and it just becomes more difficult to learn new skills. Also, people get busier later on, and so it becomes more and more difficult to make time to learn to read the Quran as a person ages. Even children now are becoming just about as busy as adults. There is a book by, I forget the name of the author, but the book is called In Praise of Slow, in which he talks about how children are almost as busy as adults now, because when a child comes home from school, he has some music class, he has extracurricular activities such as sports, and he also has his homework as well. And so the child, as they grow older, they also become very busy. Therefore, learning the Quran when they don't have as many obligations and commitments is the safe thing to do. Now, the problem is that just because a child knows how to read the Quran doesn't necessarily mean that the child wants to learn wants to read the Quran. Just because the child knows how to read the Quran doesn't mean that the child has a desire or a motivation to read the Quran. So, for example, I have seen Huffaz. Now, Huffaz, they have spent multiple years in madrasas learning to read and memorize the Quran. But I have seen them, some of them, who don't even pray now. Some of them I know have forgotten much of what they had memorized. There was one Hafiz of the Quran whom I used to pray Tarawih prayers behind, and I saw his photo in the newspaper because he had committed some crime. And so there's this disconnect between actually learning to read the Quran and having a motivation to read the Quran and having a love for the Quran. And this observation can even be seen amongst adults. Most Muslims, especially those adults that were born in Muslim countries, they know how to read the Quran. But if one were to survey how many of them read the Quran on a regular daily basis, I think we would be disappointed. Even religious Muslims who are very punctual and very active and regular in attending circles of knowledge or Islamic programs and events, or who regularly attend circles of dhikr and salawat and qasa'id. Even these people, when it comes to having a motivation to recite the Quran, there's something lacking. Now, I'm not saying don't attend circles of knowledge and circles of adhkar and salawat and qasa'id, etc. Those gatherings are very beneficial, and I encourage everybody to attend those gatherings. However, when it comes to reciting the greatest dhikr of all, which is the Quran, that same drive, that same motivation, that enthusiasm and zeal is not there for some reason. So the question now is, why is it that children specifically don't have this desire to read the Quran, and how can we motivate our children to read the Quran? One answer lies in motivation theory, which I'll get into. So a question that may be asked is, what motivates people to undertake an activity or achieve some goal in general? And I've listed a few examples on this slide just to illustrate. There could be a man, and this is a very common example. A man has found the perfect woman that he wants to marry, and so now he will do anything and everything to get married to this sister or woman, even if it means that he displeases his family, and even if it means that he has to relocate, even if it means that he has to do a PhD to satisfy his in-laws, even if it means that he has to pay a handsome mahar. Okay, he will do whatever it takes to somehow make this marriage happen. So the question is, what is motivating him to marry this woman despite all the obstacles that are before him? Why is his motivation to marry this woman so powerful that nothing is going to get into his way? Okay, similarly, there are people who are motivated to purchase a home. It is their life purpose to buy a home, even if it means that the only home affordable to them is in the outskirts of a city, away from a masjid or a Muslim community. They will buy that home. Even if it means that they have to commute 4 to 5 hours to work each weekday, they will buy that home. Even if it means that they have to go on an interest-bearing mortgage, they will belittle the whole kaba'ir, the whole seriousness of going on an interest-bearing mortgage, and go ahead and buy that home, purchase that home on that mortgage. So the question here is, what is it, or where is that motivation to buy a home coming from, despite all the difficulties and concerns that are connected to it? Okay. Similarly, there are students of knowledge, and in their thirst for knowledge, they will sleep as little as possible, sometimes as little as 2 hours a day, or even less than 2 hours a day, just to maximize their time studying, learning, and seeking knowledge. So again, where is that motivation to seek knowledge coming from? And where is that motivation to seek knowledge despite depriving themselves of sleep coming from? Okay, so there is something in us that causes us to aspire to achieve some goal despite the obstacles and difficulties connected with that goal. And the question then is, where does this motivation come from, and how can we use it to develop a motivation to read and connect with the Quran? So as I mentioned, one potential answer to this question lies in motivation theory. There's a book written by Daniel Pink. It's called Drive, and I highly recommend everyone to read this book. And much of the content that I'm going to share with you in this 3-part screencast is derived from this book. Now, the book talks about motivation theory from the perspective of the corporate world. The audience here is the corporate audience, and so he talks more about how to motivate employees and teams and organizations. But the underlying theory that he's presenting can be applied to any activity or task, including motivating someone, including our children, to read the Quran. So inshallah, in part 2 of this 3-part screencast, we'll be presenting this motivation theory to get a better understanding of what motivates us. So inshallah, I'll see you there. Assalamu alaikum.